Good afternoon, everyone. This is Naomi Sleep, Executive Director of the Florida Student Success Center. I want to wish you all a happy new year and a happy Mathematics Spring Kickoff webinar. Thank you for joining us today. Just as a reminder, the participants on the webinar will be on mute for the duration. We have placed the material from today's webinar under the handouts area. You'll see the Milestone 4 template as well as a PDF of today's slides. We will send out the material afterwards as well. Today's webinar is being recorded for those workgroup members who are unable to participate. And if you have questions you'd like to ask during today's webinar, please make sure that you use the question box to submit questions that you have, and then we will address those during the Q&A portion of our webinar. A little bit about what we want to cover today during our time is to review Milestone 3, providing a general overview of what was shared with each of our individual working group webinars we did towards the end of November. We will have our 3 mathematics workgroup chairs, Cynthia McGinnis, Dr. Julie Phelps, and Dr. Tommy Minton, report out on those milestones that the huddles have been working on. We'll have Dr. Carrie Henderson review Milestone 4 and as we think about our work moving forward. And then we'll talk a little bit about our time coming up soon for our convening at Polk State College in February, providing some opportunities for us to join together again face-to-face and work with our colleagues in Milestones 4 and 5 of the Mathematics Redesign Toolkit. So just want to spend some time talking about Milestone 3 and what it was that we were trying to address as we think about gathering our information. So Milestone 3 was guiding our discussion among our huddles to clearly define the challenges that we were trying to address as we think about our time back at St. Petersburg College, where we determined that these particular challenges rose to the top as we thought about mathematics barriers from high school to post-secondary, within the Florida college system, and then for our students going from the Florida college system into the university system as well. So what I'd like to do now is turn it over to our mathematics workgroup chairs to report out on what their huddles found for Milestone 3. Just as a reminder, this is a general overview of what we shared with our working groups at the end of November. We just wanted to make sure we provided an opportunity for all workgroup members to hear about the work to date that was happening within our mathematics workgroups. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to the chair of the High School to Post-Secondary Alignment, Professor Cynthia McGinnis.
Hello, everybody. It's good to meet with you again. So when I was looking over all the milestones, I saw these common themes. And so what I'm going to talk about today is those common themes that were in all our huddle groups. And I thought it was quite interesting to see the ideas that they were all expressing kind of meld together. So the first thing we're going to talk about is communication channels between K-12 and post-secondary, and then traditional assessments, differences between the K-12 and the post-secondary environments, and the topic of certification, training, and employment of math teachers, counselors in secondary education. So communication between K-12 and post-secondary, again, I was looking through all the huddle groups and listening to their views. I started thinking, and this is not really an easy thing to do, is define mathematics. So you can see some people think of mathematics as a language, a study of structure, a system of processes. So do we really have a clearly defined definition of mathematics and what it is to learn mathematics? How do we develop students' abilities for thinking and reasoning mathematically? So we do teach these processes, we teach memorization things, multiplication tables. But are they really learning the thinking and reasoning behind the mathematics, which I think we're all looking for, to get students that have a rich understanding of mathematics and its concepts. What are the essential knowledge skills needed in the areas of mathematics, mathematical structure, instructional practices, curriculum, and pathways. So how do we build these pathways for all students so they can build their mathematical structures in a usable way that's usable in their life? What essential concepts are necessary for developing and understanding at a deep level? So I guess we have the stream that when they come into the math classroom in college, they have some ability to know how to learn math and through understanding the concepts. What are the key concepts that all high school students need as a foundation, regardless of post-secondary education or career goals? So that is mathematical enrichment that we use throughout our lives, regardless of where we go. And so in the past, math has been taught as in a career field type concept. But mathematics for the sake of mathematics, what foundation do they need to have an appreciation and usability of mathematics? How do we align assessment in high school with assessment in college so that when they're assessed in high school, it'd be similar to college, so they're used to that. So, for example, high school has many short tests, and college might have a few bigger tests. So, how do we align those things? Traditional assessments. So, I found a huge article on this, and it was quite interesting. But how do we equitably determine what students know and can do? So, in mathematics, there's vocabulary, there's procedures, mathematical thinking, logical reasoning, concepts, problems students can formulate and solve. So this is something I did this morning. I had a handshake problem for my liberal arts students, and we worked through all these different things. I think vocabulary is really important in all classes, and if a student doesn't understand the vocabulary, there's no way they can read the book. How do we ensure that our assessments enhance mathematics learning and support good instructional practices? So a lot of these you see are in questions. This is milestone 3, to understand the question and what are our questions and how do we develop answers to them. So these PowerPoints are more in questions, but as I said, these are common themes throughout all the huddles. How do teachers negotiate the different purposes of classroom and large-scale assessment? So we assess students on a large scale, statewide possibly, but we also do it in the classroom, and generally they're not necessarily the same type of assessment. In what ways are classroom practices influenced by the demands of large-scale assessment? So most teachers, they seem to probably stress about the large-scale assessments and possibly that their classroom practices are influenced by what they expect to be on that large-scale assessment. Differences between the K-12 and post-secondary environments. There are pedagogical differences, probably expectations on standards, the depth and breadth of mathematics, assessment, calculator use on tests. So I was looking at MIT has some open courseware in calculus, and they did not allow them to use a calculator on a test, which I thought was interesting. So Sybil Beckman is a Josiah Meigs Distinguished Teacher Professor of Mathematics at the University of Georgia. One of her AMS notices called for the creation of a more unified mathematics teaching community, stating that mathematicians, mathematics educators, and teachers bear a collective as well as an individual responsibility for improvement of the mathematics education system as a whole. And I thought that was really cool because that's kind of what we're doing here. Certification, training, and employment of math teachers, counselors, in secondary education. We're looking at the breadth and the depth of mathematical concepts in teacher preparation. Is that adequate? So, are the teachers actually experiencing mathematics or just learning processes and techniques? Are the mathematics required for some institutions more robust than others? So how do we know when we employ a math teacher that their background is as robust as maybe somebody from another institution when they both have the same degree? And how do we support teachers in the classroom? Is there sufficient funding for mathematics training for all grade levels? I saw this math circle for faculty. I thought that was really cool. In fact, faculty meet in a math circle and go over problems. You know, if you know what a math circle is, you presented a problem and a group tries to figure it out, maybe without ever even knowing that particular math concept. But I thought it was really cool. They were having math circles for teachers. Are there training opportunities for K through 12 and college faculty? So the opportunities are pretty important. Are they affordable, and is there sufficient opportunities? Are parents, counselors, and students working together to develop a plan for success, be it work, trade school, community college, or university? In other words, building those pathways with the parents, counselors, and students in collaboration.
Great. Thank you, Cynthia, for sharing a lot of the work that your huddles have been doing around Milestone 3 and identifying those challenges. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So at this time, I'd like to turn over to Dr. Julie Phelps, the chair of the SCS Mathematics Sequences, to talk about the challenges within their working group.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to share this kind of as an overview. The bullets on the screen are really what the overlapping challenges are for the Florida College math sequences. And what is interesting is there's just so much overlap within the sequences itself, and then there's also overlap between what we're looking at and the relationship to the high school to Florida College system, and then also from the Florida College system to the university. So I'm kind of going to go through each one of these things and refer to them in terms of the huddles and call the huddles by name. So the very first one, requirements at the state level, are too broad. That came up in a couple of our huddles. In fact, the fact is that two huddles in particular, and our huddle number one, their huddle is about foundation preparedness, which makes sense that if we are trying to figure out what the requirements from the state are, and if it's too broad, it's really hard to figure out about whether students are prepared for the classes that we're trying to teach. The other huddle that had a lot of focus on this was huddle number 4, and huddle 3 is ambiguity of math sequencing resulting in content overlap. Well, if the requirements are large, we're going to have a lot of overlap in sequencing. So we definitely had some major issues with that, and that was one of the big themes that came out from the group. The other groups mentioned this, but it wasn't one of their major factors. The second factor had a lot of parts to it. So that would be differentiation at local levels. Gosh, that's a hard word to say at 3:15 on a, I don't even know what day this is, Tuesday. So many developmental ed courses are offered, and statewide course numbering system is too vague, and differences in course prerequisites came up quite often. In fact, I would say of the 5 huddles that we have in the Florida College system, we had Huddle 2, and they focused specifically, and Huddle 2 is about multiple sequences and pathways. Their biggest part, and was a factor identified in what they talked about, was differences in the course prerequisites. So they talked about local levels, and it was definitely an overlapping theme there. Huddle 3 also had a factor that related to this, and Huddle 3 is ambiguity of math sequencing resulting in content overlap. Their specific statement there was about there's too many developmental ed courses offered, and so it's really we don't really know what's being offered where, and so that is one of the things that we've been exploring and what that course even looks like. So that was a big theme that came out of that. I did forget to talk, I'm sorry, I want to go back to the first challenge it listed. And I will say, too, in that one that Huddle 3 really had a couple of things that I wanted to highlight. We talk about Golden Rule and the understanding of what Golden Rule is, and I'm not certain that all of us as faculty are aware of Golden Rule and what it is. So it's interesting that that kind of came up as one of the things that the ambiguity of mass sequencing group talked about. There was also another rule that they highlighted in their factors for the requirements at the state level are too broad. I had never heard of the 80% rule before, and that was one of the factors that they talked about, and we're going to get more into that later, and we're working with our partners from the state to find out a little bit more about it, but that is not actually a real rule, meaning 80% of the course, the things listed in the state requirements is what you teach. There's more information on that I can share. If you go and look at Huddle 3's report and the information that are there, you'll learn a little bit more. And that's, again, ambiguity of mass sequencing resulting in content overlap. I'm sorry I skipped that before. I do also want to say that the differentiation at local levels, we also have Huddle number 5 that talked about this. In fact, I would say that every single thing mentioned on Huddle in Huddle 5, that's revisiting prerequisites for overlap, is mentioned. These are factors that contribute to that. The next one is placement of students into the correct courses. While every single one of the Florida College System huddles had some mention about advising and placing, we had to know more about what was going on in the course. One huddle in particular, which is Huddle number 4, is on placement and advising, and they went into that and they talked about it in detail. So their main focus was about placement of students, and we were talking about advisor ratio to students and talking about what was going on there. The last one, advising of math pathways, that one, I would say that every single one of the huddles for Florida College System had a focus on this math pathways ideas. Huddle number 1 was talking about the very first little bullet underneath there about inconsistent course offering between institutions, and we definitely have had that conversation already, saying that when you look at the courses that are offered, they are not the same thing. It kind of aligns a little bit with the Dev Ed courses across the state. Huddle number 2, which is multiple sequences and pathways, every single thing listed under advising of math pathways was brought up in their factors as well. Huddle 4, specifically placement and advising, obviously this is right in their wheelhouse. Everything mentioned there was mentioned in their factors. And then Huddle number 5, which is revisiting prerequisites for overlap, focused quite a lot on advising or inconsistency between the course offerings between institutions. As I listened to the other huddles report out, I will also say that when we meet in person, one of our thoughts was making sure that we have the huddles from the Florida College System meet with the huddles from the high school to Florida College System if there's an overlap. So we recognized that there was an overlap in the factors on 2 parts for the high school to Florida College System. And I would say that my huddles, Huddle 1 and Huddle number 4, Foundation Preparedness and Placement Advising, definitely has some interesting things that overlap with the high school communication K-12 to post-secondary and differences between K-12 and post-secondary. There's definitely overlapping there, so we'll probably want to make sure we set up some communication when we meet face-to-face. For the Florida College System to University, I believe Tommy will talk about this a little bit more, but we had 3 big parts that overlapped between what he's going to talk about and what I'm going to talk about. And obviously the advising of the math pathways really does overlap quite a lot with what's going on with the Florida College System to University. Also, we have the same issues with course prerequisite differences. The Florida college system has a lot of differences, then add the university to the mix, and it definitely adds another component. So while my huddles have been focused on within the Florida college system, Tommy will tell you that his huddles have been focused on the Florida college system and university, and specifically the university. So there'll be some interesting conversations to be had there between my huddles and Tommy's huddles later on. The last one was course content. What's offered in each courses, and that's that ambiguity piece, is a big deal. And every single one of my huddles had something about our course content and what's in our pathways and what that means and what that looks like. So there's definitely some course content issues that we need to discuss between the Florida college system and the university as well. So we've been focused specifically on the Florida college system in my huddles, but when we meet together face-to-face, we're hoping to hash out some of the other issues that came up when the Florida college system and the university had their conversations. That would be a recap of everything that went on there.
Awesome. Thank you, Julie, for pointing out those overlaps and challenges that your groups are working on. And I would reiterate exactly what you just said, that when we gather next month at Polk State College, that we really encourage the cross-collaboration where we know there's overlap that's been identified, and allowing those working group members and those huddles to be able to talk face-to-face and talk about the similarities that they have. So at this time, I'd like to ask Dr. Tommy Minton, Chair of the FCS to University Alignment, to talk about the challenges that their working group has been addressing.
Okay, thank you, Naomi. On the slide here, the main 4 bullet points are our 4 huddles, and basically the challenges they identified, and then underneath them is some of the factors that go into that challenge, although again there are some overlap here, even between our huddles and, as Julie already mentioned, between our 2 work groups. Our first challenge was kind of the major one we identified at the beginning, but knowing that this was going to be more of a long-term project. And that's looking at the differences in the learning outcomes based on meta majors programs of studies and the communication about those desired math outcomes for degree programs. One of the things we looked at is kind of a lack of a clarity about what the math skills need to be mastered by students for success in given programs. And we're not just talking STEM, where we kind of know that the calculus sequence is important, but a lot of also at the non-STEM majors, though, especially the ones that require college algebra. And so it's kind of a twofold thing, is looking at what outcomes or skills these majors want their students to have, and then looking to see if our courses even cover those skills that they're requiring. So we're looking at possible changes to the objectives in the current courses, again, such as college algebra, which seems to be such a major prerequisite for a lot of majors, or the required gen ed math course that a lot of these majors want, but are we covering the skills they really need or want in the course? So we may be looking at changes to the course, or possibly the creation of new courses specific to majors and meta majors. I mean, do we need to look at a health sciences intro course, for example? Do we need to look back to the old days when there was a business pre-calculus course that business majors took before they did business calculus? But one of the other factors involved with that then is also that we identified was that institutions, especially some of the smaller ones, may be very limited in the math offerings. It is much easier to offer a catch-all course like a liberal arts math or a college math or college algebra than making specific major courses if the number of students in those majors are very limited to some of those campuses. So it's, again, a long-term goal. We've already gotten data to show the top 10 majors that our transfers out of FCS go to at the state university system. So now it's maybe kind of going in and surveying some of those majors to identify, well, what skills to do. And we also recognize, even though it's not listed as one of our factors, but definitely one of the challenges that contributing to that factor is some of the national accreditation issues as well, that it may not be something that the individual institutions or even the system as a whole can control if there is a national accreditation assessment that needs to be done. Differences in course content. Our Huddle 2 main challenge is alignment of course content. Some of the factors being, again, differences in the course content between FCS and SUS institutions, both inter and intra-institutional. Again, looking at objectives and student learning outcomes, are they consistent within the same courses? We collected syllabi from all college algebra. I think we've gotten almost all the FCS and SU institutions. If we don't have them all, I think we're pretty close. And we're going to look at really what is being covered in the course. I mean, our state common course numbering gives us a broad look at what objectives should be there, but really more looking at the fine-tooth details of it, of really chapter by chapter, section by section, what is it that everybody's covering. Leading to this also is the idea of, again, the meta majors and program of studies comes up here in this huddle as well. And again, looking and saying that, okay, these different majors are requiring this objective. Are we all covering the objective in the only common course between those majors? But we also brought in the idea of the varying course modalities and instructional methods and how that's affecting some of the content as well. When you look at some of the textbooks that are aligned with a MyMathLab or some of the way that ALEKS is built in the topics, there can be some mismatch in how the topics are presented in the different materials that we have or the different modalities. Some of the online versus face-to-face may be doing things differently and in a way kind of affecting the outcomes that are being covered. So that was one of the factors that Huddle 2 identified as looking at, as saying, is that happening? Are there some things there? A little bit of content overlap in this area as well, but I think more focused on a course by course and really looking at, are we really teaching the same course if it has the same course number? Our third huddle, looking at advising of math pathways, similar to what Julie mentioned with her group looking at how are students being advised. There is inconsistent course offerings between institutions. Not every institution's offering an MAT 1100. Some are offering an STA 1000. So there's some differences there. How students are being advised, again, based on meta major. If they come in very undecided, where are they being advised to go? Most likely, it seems like intermediate algebra is the default. And the effect of students changing programs after they've started in one of the sequences. If they've gone down a non-STEM route and decide a year or two in, hey, I'm going to transfer over into a STEM route, or I was engineering and now I think I want to switch to medical. What are we doing for those students? How is the effect of having separate courses, separate pathways? Is there a bridge between them? Some institutions may have one. That's what we're trying to identify is what's being done from an advising standpoint for those students. And again, the varying course modalities and instructional methods and course design comes up here as well. That, Julie mentioned the DevEd offerings. Some places are only offering certain courses face-to-face. I know here at my institution, we only offer 0022 face-to-face, and then we offer 0057 face-to-face and online. Are other colleges kind of dictating their pathways based on a face-to-face or online approach? How does that change instruction and course load work and stuff depending on the modality? So the course modality and instructional methods comes up in both areas here with the content and the pathways. And again, looking at the fourth huddle, differences in course prerequisites. And again, Julie mentioned that her work group's looking at this as well. So we're kind of looking at it more, again, from the university standpoint, while her group's looking more at the FCS. Again, course offerings not consistent among the universities, just like we've seen kind of not consistent across all the college system either. So again, leading to differences in prereq requirements for students that may transfer. Differences not just within the mathematics sequences and pathways. So the idea of some of the MGF courses at some institutions not having a prereq, and other places having intermediate algebra, other places having MAT 1100. But also outside of just math and other programs such as science, business, econ, finance, we've already identified some places where the prereq is not consistent. We have an example of a chemistry course that, depending on which university, which institution you're at, has a prereq of college algebra, and others have a pre-calc trig 1147 prereq. We saw the same thing with psychology. UF has a prereq and pre-calc and trig prereq, where other universities don't. Physics is another one. Physics without calculus. Are they requiring trig as a co-req or prereq, or are they just requiring college algebra? So there's inconsistency and differences in the course prereqs, and not just within the math courses, but also towards the other pathways. And in a way that also affects the advising of math pathways, again, cross huddles, that if we don't have a clarity on, okay, this course everywhere has the same prereq, or this course, depending on where you go, has different prereqs, makes it hard to advise students on what pathway to start at in their first 2 years. So that's what our 4 huddles have identified as challenges, and some of the factors that go with it.
Great. Thank you so much, Tommy, for sharing those huddle challenges between college to university alignment that your group is working on. So at this point, I just wanted to pause and talk a little bit about next steps for Milestone 3. We've had the opportunity for all 3 of our chairs to share about the challenges that each of our work groups have been working on, and identified areas of overlap as well. The staff liaisons that are here to support your work from K-12, the Florida College System, and the Board of Governors for the State University System spent some time reviewing your Milestone 3 templates, and where appropriate, added some comments to clarify current policy, provide links to resources that we thought might be of assistance to the huddles, and some suggestions for consideration as well. And we sent out a communication in December of 2018, which was a very busy time of year. And so in case you haven't had the opportunity to do so, I've provided the links to that as well. That information is also posted in Canvas, and want to make sure that that's open for all work group members and all huddles to take a look at and see the feedback that was provided as well. Just a few notes for all of our huddles to consider, making sure that you keep in mind that when we think about Milestone 3 and we're talking about challenges, to make sure that you identify the factors that you've identified in your Milestone 3 template are not to the solution phase just yet. That's coming up soon, very soon, but making sure that we're identifying factors that are contributing to the challenge at this point. So encouraging you all to revisit the factors and clarify the challenges and associated evidence and root causes that you've identified as well. Making sure that you identify specific steps to collect additional information. So if that means that you need some data requests, so that you work through your huddle lead and work group chair so that we can help support that as well. Making sure that if there's particular terms that we're using, so if we're using words like rigor or best practice, that we begin to define what those terms mean so we can clarify them, especially as we think about overlap that may exist. And then just as a reminder, that the way that Florida operates is that we are a local control state. So what that means is that many of our districts, the statutorily control decision-making on that structure, their curriculum and the instructional resources, things around personnel, professional development and scheduling is handled at the local level. So at the state level, we do not have authority to require teachers to implement particular instructional methods, to use specific resources, or attend identified professional development opportunities, and the same for our Florida College System institutions. So just to keep those things in mind as well. So I would encourage you to please use the links that you see on the screen to review that feedback that the liaisons have provided, or you can view that in Canvas under the announcements area as well, to discuss some of the feedback that you have with your huddle leads, and then to work through your huddle leads to finalize your Milestone 3 templates by the end of January, so that we can move on to Milestone 4. So speaking of Milestone 4, the next phase in our work together, I wanted to have Dr. Carrie Henderson speak a little bit about Milestone 4 and what to expect as we think about the process of linking those challenges that we've identified to solutions.
Great, thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. We are really excited to see all of the progress that has been made with Milestone 3. All of the work groups asked really pointed and important questions, and as Naomi said, as you are looking to wrap up Milestone 3, we are also working on responding to requests for data and information that you may have asked throughout the Milestone 3 process. And so as we think about our work and transitioning into the solution phase, we are moving toward Milestone 4. And this is the first time that we will ask you to start to link challenges to specific solutions. And so within your toolkit that's available on the Canvas site, we do have a Milestone 4 template that is encouraging huddles and work group members to start to brainstorm and evaluate potential solutions to the challenges previously identified in the template for gathering information. And so as we're looking to move into the Milestone 4 phase, we are targeting the first week of February as a potential completion date for this Milestone 4. Our goal by then is to have Milestone 3, to the extent that we can, wrapped up by the end of January. And as we think about moving into February, knowing that we want to come to the meeting in February to start having conversations around solutions and also to start prioritizing solutions. So we're targeting the first week of February as the deadline for Milestone 4. And as you work with your huddle leads and your work group chairs, they can also advise on the specific deadlines that they would like to allow enough time for review. So this is a screenshot of the template that is also available in a Word format in the Canvas core shell. And so in this template, similar to what you've done before, we're asking each of the huddles to consider all of the solutions that relate to the factor and address the factor that contributes to the challenge. And so as you identify the potential challenges, whether it's around materials being too broad, not having enough information available, what we're asking you to do is to continue to identify what those factors are, but then to start thinking about promising solutions. So what are some strategies that can be used to mitigate the challenge and address the challenge? And so as you're thinking about these solutions, you can certainly look to what is already happening within your institutions and within your districts that may be scalable to other institutions and to other districts. You are also encouraged to consider looking outside the state of Florida. We know that there are various states as well as various entities such as Carnegie, the Dana Center, that are implementing some solutions that you may wish to consider. And then as you are talking about the solutions with your huddles, do not feel bound by anything that is currently happening within our state or in the national landscape. We encourage you to be creative and to come up with solutions that maybe are promising and have not yet been developed. And so there's a lot of flexibility there for you to identify those promising solutions. As you think about those solutions and what they may be, we do want you to start to thinking about what the advantages and disadvantages may be of those solutions, especially as you think about narrowing down potential solutions and prioritizing them. It's important to have discussions about what's feasible within the time frame that we're looking at, what resources, financial or human resources, are needed to do this work. Are there unintended consequences that we maybe haven't thought about? So as you go through this work and you identify those solutions that you think will really address the challenge, we also want to be mindful of if we were to implement, what are the advantages and disadvantages? And then the third piece is asking you if the data and information is available, where those solutions have been implemented in the past. So is this a core software? Is this an institutional policy? Is this a state policy? If that information is available and your proposed solution is drawn from another place, such as another institution or another state, providing some examples would be useful, especially for other huddles and work groups to consider. And so that's the template that we will be asking you to work from, and we will be asking you to bring to our February meeting. We're also asking, as you do this work, to consider is there at least one solution for each of the factors listed? And so we know that there were multiple factors under each of the huddles. And so trying to keep the scope focused on all of the different potential challenges and trying to identify solutions for all of them. And so you also have a place as well to provide additional information that might be useful. And so, as I said, our hope is that as you wrap up Milestone 3 this month, look for data, look for that information, look at the staff liaison feedback and finalize those. We'll be looking for you to start these templates soon so that as we get to the February convening, we'll have these documents ready and available so that when we are there face-to-face, we have the opportunity with colleagues to discuss the potential solutions and start to engage in the prioritization process. And so now I'm going to turn it back over to Naomi, who's going to walk through the plan for that particular convening, the logistics, as well as what you might need to do to prepare.
Great. Thank you, Carrie, so much for sharing about Milestone 4 and linking those challenges to solutions. And I might say that I think it's going to be a really exciting part of the work that we're doing, and really turn to you as innovators and experts to bring forward some solutions to those challenges. And as Carrie indicated, something that could be different and something that could really transform the work we're doing and remove those barriers for students to have success in mathematics as we think about the pipeline between high school to post-secondary and beyond as well. So as Carrie indicated, we are planning on meeting next month at Polk State College, February 13th through 14th. I just wanted to talk a little bit about what our goals are for our time together. We've had the opportunity to meet today and have a webinar for all our work group members to talk about Milestone 3 and to talk about what are those challenges that we've identified that are related to those problems, and making sure that, as Carrie indicated, that we finalize our Milestone 3 templates by the end of January so that we can have a formal report out if there's substantive changes or any new factors that are identified to begin our conversation around Milestone 3, and then really providing working time. I know we heard a lot of feedback after our kickoff meeting in September that we would enjoy more working time with our colleagues from across the state and our huddles. And in this case, time for us for overlap as well in huddles across working groups to meet to address Milestone 4, which Carrie just indicated, linking challenges to solutions and bringing those Milestone 4 templates with us to continue that conversation and flesh out what those solutions are. And then moving on to Milestone 5, providing time for us to develop what those potentials to the challenges are and prioritizing those solutions as we move forward, thinking about our June one-day institute around formal recommendations, whether that's policies or practices for mathematics success in our state. So a little bit about reminders here. If you haven't done so already, I encourage you to register. I have a link on the screen to our registration website. That information does include information about lodging in the hotels that we have, and we do have a draft agenda that is posted as that may assist you with some of your travel authorization at your institutions. You are invited to join us at a welcome dinner the night before, February 13th at 6:30 at Harry's Seafood Bar and Grill. It's directly across the street from the host hotel, the Terrace Hotel. And then we will meet the next morning at the Polk State College Lakefront campus in the technology building. There is a map on the registration website for your convenience, and kick off our day as we think about wrapping up Milestone 3 and spending time as working group members on Milestone 4 and 5 as well. As a reminder, the cost of your hotel room will be covered upon checkout as it was for our kickoff meeting. You will need a purchase card or a credit card to book your hotel and to cover any additional incidentals that occur, but we will be covering those lodging costs for you. And to thank you and support you in your work and really encourage you to spend the day with us on February 14th, which is a very important day, and we recognize your commitment to spending that day with us is to after the meeting, each institution will receive a travel stipend amount of $100 for each participant that was present to really help offset some of those additional travel expenses you may have, whether that be rental cars or gas for travel as well. And that was just a wrap up about our meeting of February 13th and 14th at Polk State College. If you have any questions, please reach out to me and let me know. I know that the Terrace Hotel, the room block closed as of yesterday, but we do have an overflow hotel listed on there as well. So if you haven't made your lodging reservations yet, please know that there is another hotel that's listed as well that you may make those lodging reservations. So at this point, I think we just wanted to open it up for any questions and answers that you have at this point in time. You can use the chat feature box if you have any particular questions you'd like for us to answer. Okay. I don't see any particular questions at this time. That doesn't mean that if you go back and you take a look at the webinar material again, or you have the opportunity to review your Milestone 3 feedback, if you have particular questions for your huddles or your workgroup chairs or for your liaisons, we are here to support you and happy to answer those questions that you have. Thank you for your time today. We will follow up with all the meeting material as well as a recording of this and provide links to the registration page, and hope that we will see you all at our Polk meeting on February 14th next month. Thank you so very much.